put it together. And it has an interesting explanation for the criterion for identifying the Christ. So it says in the article, page 13, as we move steadily into the new millennium, we are able to look back with calm appreciation of the work done by the Christ and his group during the 20th century. The work he performed through his closely knit inner group was remarkable and unique, and of course is never fully completed, but undergoes phases of manifestation, change, and closure. A criteria for identifying the Christ may be formulated from the certainties of his experiences in his past manifestations and again in this one. Number one, he has the sure bodily signs of having suffered more than any. Two, he is a teacher reaching mankind across the earth. Three, he is a trained healer, always healing at some level those near and far from him. Four, he operates outwardly on the ray of will and power and inwardly on the ray of love, wisdom. Second ray. Five, he is impoverished and celibate. Six, he is constantly under attack from innumerable directions. Seven, he is surrounded and supported by those who have sacrificed or surrendered something of their lives to him. 8, he is taken for granted by the thousands who have met him or know of him, but not always so. 9, he has appeared widely on radio and television as Alice Bailey said he would. 10, his miracles are in his works where they should be, and they have grown prodigiously for those who care to examine them patiently. 11, Alfred Lord Tennyson, noted for his seership, forecast accurately the birthday of the Christ. 12, it is said that avatars are born when a great temple is burnt to the ground. At the hour of his birth, the most famous in the esoteric world was consumed by fire. 13, he is known esoterically to his closest friends who support his work against concerted attacks. 14, he is anxious to avoid emotion and sensationalism and therefore maintains for the time being a low profile, traveling incognito. 15, these observations are put out collectively by his friends, most of whom have been for many years. They are located around the world, and some administer for him. So that's the criteria that I use. Anyway, we had a very interesting discussion last week on the solar chart, solar horoscope of Dr. Fauci. We don't know his time of birth. And so we did a solar chart. We've done solar charts in the past with salubrious results. I was astounded by what was uncovered in Fauci's horoscope. And we went over a number of the aspects, nine different, I believe it was, things came up. But there were 3 that I left out. And what we want to do tonight, because of time constraints, is we want to try to, within about 40 minutes, because that seems like that's all the viewers really can handle. I had a couple of people complain about 57 minutes last week. So we're going to try to keep it to 40 minutes, which was the original proposition that I made to the people here in attendance at my home tonight. What we do is we have a dinner, usually pizza and salad. People bring in a lot of things also. That'll probably morph into a potluck dinner like we used to have 10, 15 years ago. And so we're constantly trying to adjust our venue, what we do. We have other people speak. We give PowerPoint presentations here on our TV that's behind me. I've got about 53 or 54 PowerPoints that one of the former students at Claregate has put together for me. Did a great job. And so I try to keep her busy. I've got a couple more lectures we're going to do on Egypt, Göbekli Tepe, and the Bosnian pyramids. That'll be the most recent one. Our original intent for tonight was to give a PowerPoint lecture on the consciousness of the moon and its occult history. Because of last week and because of the volume of information that we had on the horoscope for Dr. Fauci, and the fact that it was very well received, I thought I better make up and fill in those gaps from last week's lecture. So that's what I want to do tonight. The other thing that I want to say is that what we are employing here tonight is a little different. It's not mundane astrology by any means. It may be a level above esoteric astrology in what some initiate beings around the globe are calling quantum astrology. The laws of quantum apply to what I'm doing tonight and are confirmed by a dictionary of astrology, a 3-volume dictionary of astrology that was written 30 years ago by Dr. Douglas Baker and a group of his students who put them together, the aspects, where he took the 500,000 words of the English language and prescribed astrological aspects to each word. 500,000 words of the English language, so that it means that the aspect can be turned into a sentence. And that's what I'm going to do tonight. It really employs the very foundational principles of quantum physics insofar as it applies to astrology. We say that an aspect is in its superposition state until it's viewed, at which time it collapses into probabilities, possibilities which are written out as permutations. And so what I'm going to give you here tonight are the permutations of Dr. Fauci's horoscope. We said last week, I had a lot of notes, and some of the things got lost in my notes, but certainly the first thing that I noticed right off the bat was the 12th house, which shows Sagittarius in the 12th house. And for me, in my understanding of astrology, it shows self-undoing. That the 12th house oftentimes is the house of self-undoing. And it shows that he has aspirations. Sagittarius is the sign of aspirations. We saw this with Hillary Clinton's horoscope. Tremendous aspirations. Wanted to be the first female president. Envisioned, it's said esoterically by certain initiate teachers, that she wanted her head portrait carved in stone at Mount Rushmore. So she really had huge, huge aspirations. And so did Fauci. It's why he's still working. Some people say, initiate friends of mine, that he was hopeful. He was hopeful that he would be awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for his work on the COVID-19 epidemic. But interestingly enough, opposite the 12th house is the 7th house, which parses, according to Baker's Dictionary of Astrology, as delinquency. He's proven pretty much that he's a delinquent, I would say, at least in my mind's eye. Many people will agree with that, I'm sure. But in the first house, with the sun in Capricorn, it shows the parsing of the sun in Capricorn is a pretentious bureaucrat. Somebody who is a bureaucrat, he's the highest paid bureaucrat in America. It's Dr. Fauci, makes more than the president of the United States. And he's pretentious. He's pretending to be something that he really isn't. He's not that much of an expert. He's more of a politician and an opportunist. The truth will come out. Many of us in the ashram that I belong to believe that he is the first domino to fall in a chain of dominoes that will essentially destroy the swamp. But there are many aspects to the swamp. The swamp eventually will be drained through decentralized government, which is a fourth ray energy. It's what the energy of the fourth ray does. It brings decentralized government, city-state government. We saw it in ancient Rome or in the Renaissance in Europe. We saw the decentralization of a central government into the city-state governments of Florence, Venice, any of the major cities of Italy, and really throughout Europe, became quite a force to be reckoned with. One of the most interesting things that we picked up in the first house was Mercury and Capricorn, which parses as a tyrannical edict, a tyrannical edict. And so I wrote out some of Fauci's tyrannical edicts. Everybody must be vaccinated. Everybody needs to wear a mask. Everybody needs to wear 2 masks. You can't travel, you can't go anywhere. You can't go to church. You can't visit your family in the hospital. You can't go to funerals. That's tyrannical. That's what we mean by tyrannical edicts. It's right there in this horoscope. It's in a solar chart. Perfect. It's the parsing. Look it up in the Dictionary of Astrology. An afflicted Capricorn. We talked about the opposition of the sun and earth here in the 7th house is delinquency. And he seems to me to be more delinquent every time I hear him on TV. He's constantly changing his story. He's obviously very political. And he himself will be a victim of his own self-undoing, which is really a common thing for people to have. Sagittarius in the 12th house also parses, Sagittarius in the 12th house, parses as a drug trafficker. Who is the biggest drug trafficker in the world?
Chapo.
Dr. Fauci.
Oh.
Vaccines.
Got that wrong.
And his self-undoing will come at the end of his life. He's 80 years old and he's still working. And his self-undoing is soon to unfold.
Not too soon.
some of these were just, they were just absolutely staggering. The fourth house translates in the dictionary of astrology as Mars and Aries translates as quizzling. He's a Quizler. And the word quizzling didn't exist until World War II. There was a Norwegian officer who was a turncoat for the Norwegian people and sided with the Nazis. And his name was Quisling. Victor Quisling was his name. And Quisling, or to be a Quizler, became a neologism, a new word after World War II to identify people that were untrustworthy and were deceitful. And it's interesting that Fauci, it's what it pertains to is siding with the enemy. So here's Fauci sending money to the Chinese Communist Party for research into bat viruses. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, and to think that it's there in a horoscope that was written 30 years ago is staggering to my way of thinking. His fifth house also shows with Uranus, Taurus, retrograde that he functions as a backseat driver. But his team ends up being asked a lot of questions, and that's just unfolding right now. He's trying now to sort of take a back seat because he realized he ain't going to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And so he's trying to weaken himself and lessen his dominance and influence. And there's another guy who's starting to take the heat for it. I just saw it on TV last night. I can't think of his name right now. I should have written it down. But he was actively there in China in the lab, and now he's trying to deny its origin when he himself knows that it actually came from the lab. It's absurd to think that it didn't, but people believe what they want to believe. The thing that was staggering to me, we didn't talk about last week, so we're going to talk about a little bit this week, is in the midheaven of a solar chart, Neptune and Virgo in the midheavens with Libra on the distal cusp of the ninth house. It parses in the dictionary of astrology as virology. Virology.
You can't make it up.
You can't make this stuff up. It also parses as influenza and postmortem.
Oh, no.
Now, the contention is that all these hundreds of thousands of people died from COVID. A lot of them did, but a lot of them didn't, and they got added on to the numbers to increase the numbers. And that's where the post-mortem aspect of the virology, I wrote it out right there in my own writing, virology and influenza, parses, right there. We're talking about taking aspects and turning them into a language. One of the deep esoteric secrets. I've told some people about this before. Does she have to do something there?
I'm sorry.
And we have to take just a second here. We got a puppy dog. Put up one of those mats down out there for him. It also, let's see, where was I? I was talking about.
Virology.
Virology. And another parsing of this is matters with a precise formula.
Precise.
Oh,
What is the precise formula? Well, it's the vaccine.
Right.
The vaccine is the precise formula. We have to have the precise formula for a vaccine to eliminate this scourge that is traveling around the world, the pandemic.
Mhm.
So out of these this aspect here of Neptune in Virgo in the ninth house with Saturn in the midheaven on the distal cusp of the ninth house, we're parsing three things: virology, influenza,
Postmortem.
postmortem, four things, and matters of a precise formula. Four things, four terms or meanings come out of that one aspect.
Wow. Wow.
I wish I could make this up. I can't. That's the beauty. That's the beauty of it. The eighth house is extraordinary with Leo retrograde Pluto. You don't find too many people when they talk about their astrology that elaborate much truth about Pluto and its influence. But it was interesting for me to uncover certain things that were pointed out in the dictionary. And the first thing that came to mind was scourge, a scourge, a pox. That's a pandemic. Smallpox was a pandemic. Used to kill millions of people. I gave a lecture, interestingly, I gave a lecture right here in this room before the COVID on a medical hypothesis for the origin of AIDS. Anybody remember that lecture? You got to get that on YouTube. We talked about the origin of AIDS and the possibilities. There were several possibilities for the origin of AIDS. And one of the origins was that it came through the World Health Organization mass inoculation program in Central Africa to go down there and inoculate 50 or 70 million African people with the antidote for smallpox, which they used, which they actually created while they were in Africa by giving the pox to cattle. And then the cattle would produce the antibodies for the smallpox. And it got away from them. It got away from them by virtue of the fact that many of the cattle suffered from bovine leukemia virus. And when the smallpox was given to the cattle who were suffering from bovine leukemia virus, it created a hybridized virus that became AIDS. And the center point of the AIDS epidemic was identified as Central Africa. And interestingly enough, there were huge numbers, 20 or 30,000 Haitian soldiers were in Central Africa at that time to help the governments, French-speaking governments in Central Africa, and they were also inoculated. And some of them were given this hybridized virus and consequently AIDS. That's the hypothesis of this medical paper. It was written by a friend of mine at General Motors. It was a genius. He was beyond genius. And the paper was sent around the world to many doctors, and he proved, if his theory was correct, he then said that he could prove and could invent a vaccination for AIDS if his medical hypothesis was correct. What his medical hypothesis did not explain was it did not explain Ebola virus. So when I asked my friend and teacher, Douglas Baker, about it, he said that the AIDS virus was in the soil of Central Africa, which portion of Africa was a Lemurian landmass, and that the virus was Lemurian in its origin, and that the land had laid dormant for millions of years. And the World Bank decided they were going to turn all these Central African people into peanut farmers, cashew nut farmers. And when they did, they began to till the soil. And in tilling the soil, they brought the virus to the surface that had laid dormant. And they can lay dormant for millions of years because they're crystalline structures. A virus and a crystal are curiously related and are similar. And when they go dormant, they become crystalline. And that hypothesis explains Ebola, that Ebola was a disease of Lemurian origin and that it lay dormant for millions of years. And it too, periodically, is brought to the surface, not to the extent, perhaps, with the peanut farmers and AIDS, but they have found even in forested areas where they're digging and working and trying to clear land, that there periodically will be these outbursts of Ebola. It's worth thinking about.
Mhm.
And if you're a student of the esoteric, you're supposed to be thinkers. So the other thing was, in this aspect, scourge, pox. He had an unusual thing that he wrote that also applied to Hillary Clinton in her horoscope when I did that, and that was the massacre of the innocents. And he calls it outing Herod. If you know anything about the Bible and about Herod, was an evil king who had rumors that a Christ child had been born and he wanted these children killed, and he became a very evil sort of a king. And another aspect that was in the eighth house parsed out as the delinquent is out on the jag. What does that mean? We said he was a delinquent. His 12th house or his 7th house parsed as delinquency. The delinquent is out on a jag. A jag, when I was in the Army, after I got back from Vietnam for a short time on weekends, I would have to be I was a prison guard in a First Army maximum security prison where there was some really bad guys. And I used to have to take these guys. I had a loaded shotgun, and I would march them down the street, down to the JAG officer's compound there. And a JAG is the, what's it called? The adjutant general. It's the legal branch of the military. Is a JAG officer. JAG, JAG. Judge Adjutant General. What does that mean? Well, it means that Anthony Fauci probably won't be tried in a criminal court. He'll be tried in a military criminal court. That's what it looks like to me. It'll be him and a whole bunch of people will be tried in a criminal military tribunal. In fact, there's an attorney in Germany who is trying to bring a military tribunal together. And it may take, instead of always waiting for America to do everything, if we're really moving into a new age, it may be that it will take European countries to unite to bring down this cabal that is prevalent in Washington, D.C. and throughout the world. It involves the Chinese, it involves all kinds of wealthy people. Look at Epstein. My newest theory on Epstein, I haven't done his horoscope, we should do that, is that he was actually financed by the Chinese to entrap American politicians down in his island, wherever it is in the Caribbean. We'll see. It's going to take time, but it could come out. He didn't. How did he all of a suddenly become a billionaire financier? Nobody ever heard of him before. You know, he had pictures of him with what's his name?
Prince.
Prince Andrew, Chris Wallace, the news comic, getting off the boat, Epstein's meeting with him down there. It'll all come out. It's a horrible, horrific thing. It's so bad that an initiate friend of mine told me they can't release the truth all at once because nobody would believe it. It's too overwhelming. You couldn't comprehend it. So it'll come out in little pieces at a time, see, and they'll start picking them off. And that Fauci, many believe in a particular ashram that I belong to, that Fauci will be the first of the dominoes to fall. Also, what was interesting was it parsed out the same thing, same thing parsed out as there's more to it than that. An approach to astrology that is new. It's in a dictionary written by an initiate being of a very high degree. And we've employed aspects of quantum physics into the astrology, and we've turned the aspects into words and statements. And that's where we're at tonight. I think we're probably, we got about 5 minutes left on our program this evening. We're trying to keep these shorter because people complained that the 57 minutes last week was too long. So if anybody would like to ask a question, we've covered a lot of material in an appallingly brief period of time, but we had to. So if what I want to say to the people who are here in this room with me tonight at my home classroom, and to say to the people who are on Zoom, is that the prophecy says the events of 2025 will be the externalization of the spiritual hierarchy of the planet. And I talked to Baker about that one time, and he said to me 12 years ago, just outside London at his home, he said, the problem in the world is that there's a worldwide conspiracy of pedophiles where politicians, Hollywood people, and all of that has to be cleared up before we can experience the new world renaissance of 2025. He said the world is corrupt beyond belief, and it's got to be cleaned up before the hierarchy will externalize themselves. And I thought, how in the world is that ever going to happen? We may be watching it unfolding right before our eyes, and don't even really know it. That's what I think. So anybody have any questions they'd like to ask? We got a couple minutes.
I do.
Yeah, Doreen.
Do you think that I believe definitely that the virus was, came from the lab, but do you think it was purposely released to the world, or was it an accident? What's the theory on that? Do you have one?
Both could be true.
Right.
I don't know.
I know.
It doesn't matter. It got out.
It got out.
Yeah.
Right.
But it shows you the danger. And I can remember when I was 13 years old, 14 years old. in my little town I grew up in, Indiana. This is a true story. And I'm with some other teenage kids. And there was a kid, his mother was from England. His name was Jim Shirk, really handsome kid, smart, tremendous athlete. And we're talking about World War III. That's 60 years ago, we were talking about World War III. And he said, when it comes, he said, they'll use viruses. He said, they're not going to drop atomic bombs. He was 2 years older than me. So he was 15 and I was 13. And he said, they'll use viruses. He said, they won't. If the atom bombs will destroy everything. They don't want to destroy everything. They just want to kill off the enemies. That's an absolutely true story. I can remember standing there when he said that.
I bet.
Jim Shirk. Yeah,
Wow, he was probably an advanced soul.
yeah,
Yeah.
sure. But here's a bunch of teenage kids talking about World War III and what's it going to be? 60 years ago. 60 years. It's worth thinking about. So the Chinese now know that through viruses, they can bring more damage than probably they ever imagined. They're witnessing it.
Right. Yeah.
They showed a graduation class in Wuhan, college students graduate. Nobody was wearing a mask. Well, only in America
Mhm.
are they wearing masks,
Right.
but not in Wuhan.
Yeah, I know.
Why is that?
Yeah, I know.
So I think the next 4 years is going to be real interesting. And we'll see if the spiritual hierarchy deems it necessary to externalize themselves if they're willing to do that. Their plans change too, you know?
Mhm.
So, yeah, Randy.
If something is shown in the chart, can we pretty much say this is something that will happen, that the chart wouldn't be wrong about that?
I don't tell people that. I always say it's within the realm of possibilities.
Okay.
This is a solar chart. And the thing that amazed me about the solar chart was how accurate what I was pulling out
Right.
was just astounding. It's confirmed by the Dictionary of Astrology that was written 30 years ago, over 30 years ago.
To me, that was the most encouraging part when you talked about the military tribunal,
Yeah,
because Reiner Fuellmich is the attorney.
that's the guy. I couldn't think of his
Reiner
name.
Fuellmich,
Yeah.
and he said it will probably happen in a military court.
Yeah, we'll have to.
Yes.
Yeah,
And so
because
it's
the
like, I
civil-
hope it's true.
Civil courts are so crooked, see,
Right.
that who trusts the civil court?
So, yeah. So
Buy
this-
your way out.
Nobody does. Yeah, they all do. I mean, look, nobody's prosecuting Hunter Biden.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
See, because this is what Baker told me. This was the other thing I wanted to tell you what Baker told me. He said 12 years ago, he said, all of the executives, the bulk of them who are in charge of these television news networks, they're all involved in this child sex trafficking scheme, this thing that's going on that we don't even know anything about. The average person doesn't know anything about, but it's true. It makes more money than the drug cartels. Now the drug cartels are getting involved in the child sex trafficking.
Yeah.
And the way they make the money is they'll make a 10-minute video, and all the perverts and deviants in the world will pay hundreds of dollars to watch a 10-minute video. There's millions of them across the planet. So they can make $400 million in 10 minutes. Think of that. And probably what Epstein was doing was he was probably filming and photographing those guys when they were with the young girls.
Right.
And this goes on with children who are from age 0 age 0 up to age 15, 16, 17 years old. But it starts at age 0. And then in some of them, they actually kill the children.
Oh, I was gonna say that.
They're called snuff films.
Yeah.
And it's horrible. And it gets worse. I can't even talk about it.
It's demonic.
And then there's the whole issue of the adrenochrome and what's going on with that. And it'll all come out, but it has to come out sporadically because it's too much for average people to comprehend. You can't comprehend it. But anyway, Fauci, I believe, is the tip of the iceberg. And that would indicate Capricorn too, because if the Capricornian symbol is reversed, I don't have a piece of chalk here to draw, but it would be a mountaintop. And it's Capricorn is the goat who scales the mountaintop.
Yeah.
And the reverse of that would be the tip of an iceberg. It would be the great majority of it is submerged below the ocean, and there's just a tip of it sticking out. And I believe that Fauci is the tip who's sticking out for the time being.
Mhm.
And that eventually, what happens to an iceberg was the way the English Channel was formed. There was an immense iceberg, and it went turtle up. And when it did, it pushed all that ice and gravel down through and created the white cliffs of Dover, were like a buzzsaw that went down through there. It's initiate knowledge that England then really became separated from France in the area called the Doggerland. It was once known as the Doggerland. But when this iceberg melted and it flipped over, it threw out in all directions, of course, this tremendous ice debris that was there, the smaller icebergs, and gravel and sand and whatever debris there was. And it created the divide known as the English Channel. It's worth thinking about. Anyway, it's time's up. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in on Zoom. And we can go upstairs if you want, or we can stay here and visit. We always do our closing ceremonies that Gary does so eloquently and leads us in. Yeah. Okay, thanks again.
Thank you, David.